So with no further ado, I'm going to call the Chancellor to greet and bless us with his good words, and then we will be moving to the introduction, and then I'll come back to the podium.
Thank you, Micheline. And welcome, everyone. It is a full crowd here, and it's a delight to see so many people for such an incredible event. Let me begin by thanking the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. This is a jewel in the crown of Korbel School of International Studies, as well as the University of Denver. My wife and I really enjoy these events. We learn so much and benefit from the great dialogue, the balanced points of view that the faculty here in the Center for Middle Eastern Studies put on here. So thank you so much for your role in making this a delightful event. I also want to thank our wonderful guests, Maoz, Inon, and Aziz Abu Sarah. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. They will be sharing their deeply personal stories and perspectives. I had a chance to talk with them just briefly before the start of the event. I know you're going to have a wonderful, engaged time with them. I'm going to keep these remarks very brief so you can get right on with the program. One thing I do want to say, unfortunately, that this is homecoming week, and so the Chancellor has to be at multiple events, and so we will not be able to stay with you all, and we regret missing such a great dialogue on that. But what I do want to emphasize today is how deeply important these conversations, like the ones you're about to hear, are to have. These are important for our students that are here today. These are important for our faculty and staff, and especially important for our broader community here. These are not easy, though. These are topics that come deeply into our emotional psyche, and they may not be comfortable at times. But it is critical that we continue to model how to approach these very difficult conversations, challenging as they are, for a deeper understanding, for a deeper sense of empathy. So as we continue to model how to earnestly grapple with these ideas and perspectives, we know that they will rub against our beliefs, our assumptions, or our backgrounds. But what's important to keep in mind is that this is intellectual inquiry at its finest. It's curiosity, it's humility, it's respect. And in all of that, keep in mind that there is a joy in intellectual humility. The joy in learning, the joy in becoming stronger as a result of that. So this is how we prepare students to graduate and become incredible leaders in our country, in the world, and become people that the world truly needs, no matter what their field is, no matter their community, no matter their location. So thank you all for joining us, the community members, faculty, staff, students. I especially thank the faculty that make this programming possible. Our students are better for it. Our faculty, staff, our community members are better for it. We are all better for these kinds of events. So enjoy the rest of the show. Enjoy the joy of intellectual humility. Thank you so much. And now I get to invite to the podium Dean Fritzmeier. Dean.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Fritz Mayer, as Dean here at the Korbel School. It's a real pleasure to be introducing tonight's event and hosting it, as to echo the the Chancellor. These are such important conversations, and we're so proud of the Center of Middle East Studies for hosting them, for organizing them, and so delighted and looking forward to the conversation this evening. Let me say a couple of words about the center. The Center for Middle East Studies is really a vibrant center, hub of scholarship and dialogue, dedicated to understanding one of the world's, maybe the world's most complex region. As you well know, all of you wouldn't be here otherwise, in recent years, certainly the last year, the Middle East has experienced a whirlwind of transformative events marked by extreme violence and tragedy. Amidst all this, on this campus, the center has really emerged as a place to learn, to foster critical discussion, and to model, as the Chancellor just described, the way in which we want to approach issues of such great importance and complexity. The Center of Middle East serves as a platform for scholars, practitioners, and students to engage on pressing issues, from conflict resolution and human rights to economic development and environmental sustainability. It strives to bridge divides and promote understanding through interdisciplinary approaches, recognizing that the challenges faced by the Middle East are inherently global. Today's event, October 7th and beyond, A Path to Peace, represents an important conversation about how we get from where we are today to peace and indeed beyond. We are just thrilled to have two leading peace activists, Aziz Abu Sarah and Maoz Inon, who, as the Chancellor referenced, and you will hear, speak from personal experience about both the conflict and their efforts to find peace in the region. The conversation will be moderated by Micheline Ishai, who's the director of the center, and Q&As will be hosted by Ahmed Abrabu, who is the associate director. Let me just introduce quickly Micheline and Ahmed. Micheline Ishai is professor of international studies and human rights at the Joseph Corbell School here of International Studies. She's director, as I said, of the Center for Middle East Studies. Author of a half-dozen books, including The Levant Express, The Arab Uprising, The Arab Uprisings, Human Rights, and the Future of the Middle East, and the History of Human Rights from Ancient Times to the Globalization Era. Her work has been translated into multiple languages and published in second or third editions. She was a visiting professor in a number of academic settings, including Jerusalem, Abu Dhabi, Berlin, Paris, Washington, and probably others. Ahmed Abrabu will be hosting the Q&As. He's professor and associate director of the Center of Middle East Studies here at the Corbell School. Rabu has published many articles on democratization in Egypt and other Arab nations. He specializes in civil-military relations, political Islam, and democratization in the Middle East, where he currently focuses his research. His most recent books are Good Governance and Civil Security Relations, a comparative study of Turkey and Egypt, and The Modern History of Egypt. So thank you to my colleagues for organizing and leading this discussion and moderating the Q&A. And now to our special speakers, two leading peace activists who only recently were blessed by the Pope, I'm told. Aziz Abu Sarah is a peace builder, cultural educator, author, and entrepreneur. A National Geographic Explorer and TED Fellow, he's the co-founder of Meiji Tours and Interact International. He's served as executive director at the Center for World Religions, Diplomacy and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University, and as chairman of the Parents Circle Family Forum, an organization of bereaved Palestinian and Israeli family members. Abu Sarah lost his brother in a confrontation with Israeli soldiers. Maoz Inon is an award-winning Israeli social entrepreneur and peace activist and the founder of several tourism initiatives within Israel and the broader Middle East, including the Jesus Trail, the Fauzi Azar-in, and the Abraham Hostel and Tour brands. Since the murder of his parents in the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, Inon has become a leading voice for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. Thank you so much for being here. Before we start, just a few ground rules. I probably don't need to tell you these, but I will. The subject of Israel's conflict in Gaza has been the source of great volatility on campuses around the country, and certainly ours. And we'd like to continue to showcase our model of critical engagement and civil discourse. To ensure that, the basic ground rules for this event: please, no heckling or otherwise disrupting speakers or other guests. Anyone who does so would be asked to leave. Questions should be posed civilly and respectfully. And while personal items such as pins or scarves are permitted, there must be no flags, signs, or clothing with insulting language. Looking at you, recognize that that was not a necessary admonition. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our speakers and to my colleague, Micheline Shai, to whom I will now turn the microphone.
Welcome, Denver, and those beyond who see us on live stream. It's great to see a packed house. Al-Salam alaikum jamia wa ahlan wa salan bikum. Did I try the Hebrew? Okay. Shalom aleichem ve'bruchim ha'abאים likulchem. Now I'm going to try this one. Salam be'ameh wa kosh amadid. Where is Reza to correct my Farsi? Okay. Great to have you all here. Thanks for coming to our program. And I wanted to, before we start this program, I want to just say a couple of things about the speaker who are coming to Denver all the way from wherever in the world they have been. After seeing the Pope, we really are feeling blessed by that. So I want just to say that I have worked with Aziz Abu Sarah before the pandemic, and thanks to the donation for philanthropist, Dr. Paul Doctor, who organized with the Korbel School of International Studies several years an education tour which took Korbel students and others to Israel and the West Bank. There, our students really met a great number of people from different backgrounds and perspectives. Students met politicians, NGOs, and visited critical places, and on both sides. The goal was for them to move freely between Israel and the West Bank without hindrance or prejudgment. So we let them see for themselves and engage people for 2 intensive weeks. The other point that I want to make is that peace did not start overnight. Our speaker here have been doing that for a very long time. I'm just going to go briefly on the slide because I really like some of the slides, and there are some, the students went to the Golan Heights, a guided stroll along the walls, and it's not going in the way I asked, along the stroll of the wall of the old city of Jerusalem, a visit to the Sheikh of Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, a visit with judges on the Israeli Supreme Court. Another visit was at the Hebrew University with renowned professor of international human rights, David Kretzmer. Another visit was with the Israeli Knesset at the time. I don't know if you have that there, maybe next, yes. Was the then headquarters of the Meretz Party, which is no longer a party, but was a Green Party at the time. Another was with the Women of Wage Peace. And then another to the Al-Rawad refugee camp in the West Bank. Another to the Aida Palestinian refugee camp of Bethlehem. Then we went to the hill of Masada. Then we went to the Mount Precipice in Nazareth. Then we went to the Druze community of Majd al-Shams. Then we went to see, yes, Jewish settlements in the West Bank. And then we went, yes, to the Palestinian Authority headquarters of Ramallah in the West Bank. And finally, this is Paul Doctor, who you sees us, is probably seeing us. So thank you for all this amazing trip. This is the Golan Heights. And then finally, to a dinner with Aziz Abu Sarah family in Bethany in the West Bank. This is sort of a picture behind me of Dr. Amal Jabu, who's here in the West Bank, in the headquarters of the Palestinian Authority. So our students really had an extraordinary, they went dancing, Israeli, Palestinian musicians, and many more visits with officials and places that time permits me not to recount in this moment. But it was quite transformative, and I can see two of the students who were in those trips who are in the audience, and I don't want to embarrass you, but here you are, and thank you for coming to this event here. Just say Rezwan and Shannon, thank you for being here. So this would not have been possible, and I want to make sure, without the Mejdi tour, and the generous donation from Paul Doctor's philanthropy. We hope that in a not too distant future, we will be able to resume these transformative trips. So I hope you will appreciate the Center of Middle East Studies program, and tonight's one in particular, and those who you will consider provide support and donation. The leaflet on your chair is not to be thrown away. It has a barcode, and you are welcome to show your support in this particular way. So just before I move to the podium, I want to say thanks to Mandy Loader, our new program managers, Reza, Connors, Connie, and others who have helped us putting this together. So really, thank you very much. So let me just move to the podium and come back to you. Okay. So it was a week ago, was it a week ago, October 7th?
Yeah.
It was only a week
Monday.
ago. Monday, a week ago. Seemed a long time ago, but it was just a week ago. And a very poignant time, I'm sure, for you, Maoz, and in different way for you as well, Aziz. Can each of you share your personal journey into peace activism? Where were you on October 7th? Difficult question, but I have to ask. And what did that day change, and how did that day change your perspective? Because you continue your peace project and endeavors, and how did you do that? How do people move from raw grief to peace activism? How that happen? What's the trick?
We have 1 hour each.
No, you have 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Because I know you will stretch.
Okay. I will start, Aziz? Okay. Before we start, in the first slide, when we came here, it was written a path to peace ? Right? And it shouldn't be a question mark. It should be exclamation point. Okay? Because peace is possible. Those are the only 3 words that if I want you to remember anything after this amazing event, thank you for making it happen. Those 3 words should be peace is possible. On October 7th, I lost both my parents, and then I started my journey on the path to peace. And I started being interviewed in all media and outlets around the globe. And at the first few weeks, I used to start by saying that nothing can prepare you. Nothing can prepare you for losing both your parents, many of your childhood friends, their parents, their children that will be killed or kidnapped to Gaza. You cannot be prepared. But then as I understand more and more what is happening, I realized that I was prepared. I was prepared for October the 7th. And I was prepared by my parents. My parents prepared me and my siblings to know exactly what to do, what to say, and how to act at the moment of their death. And it started with my brother, that only 3 days after asked the family to send a universal message that we are seeking no revenge. We don't want to revenge the death of our parents. Because by revenging their death, we are not going to bring them back. We're just going to escalate the cycle of bloodshed, of hate, of revenge that has been going on not since October 7th. That has been going on for a century. And it is within our family mission to break this cycle and to offer and start paving a new path, a path to peace. So maybe I didn't answer your question, but October 7th found me ready. It found me ready to the mission, the greatest mission of my life, and I think the greatest mission of humanity, to make peace.
Thank you. Thank you. You want to? Both.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll start with the October 7th and tell my story. I just had been to Jerusalem and traveled back to the States. One of my colleagues at Majdi Tours called me and said there's a war. We figured out the first few hours we were trying to get our travelers out of the country. Honestly, this was the only thing we were focused on because we had 60 travelers and their safety was the most important. And then we started figuring out people we knew who've been hurt. Vivian Silver, who's a friend of mine, was killed. I found out Kim, who works with me, her friend was taken captive. And then I found out about Maoz's parents, so I sent him a message of condolences. And that's, I think, how you become a peacemaker. You ask what gets you there is, I think, learning to have empathy and understanding that no civilian should ever be attacked, killed. And that was my stand on October 7th and my stand after October 7th with what's happening in Gaza and the bombing and with what's happening in Lebanon. I think we have to have a very high level of empathy. Now, I grew up in Jerusalem. My brother was killed when I was 10 years old, and he was beaten up in prison. So I grew up not supporting of peace work. I thought peace is a ridiculous idea. If you're 10 years old and somebody kills your brother, you're definitely not ready for it. I was not where Maoz was after his parents were killed. And it was very difficult. I was very bitter, very angry. And it took me 8 years where I was very hardcore activist against the notion of peacemaking. Until for the first time I met Israeli Jews who I found to be my partners in this struggle. And it happened when I went to study Hebrew. I refused to study Hebrew in my high school. It was mandatory, but I refused to study it. And then when I finished high school, I realized if you don't speak Hebrew, it's a big problem. You're not going to find a job, you're not going to work. And studying Hebrew is where I met people who changed my perception. And so that's what set me up on that journey. And I realized that every time I chose to hate, I was being a slave to the person who killed my brother. And actually choosing a different path was me taking my life into my own hands, kind of my decisions, my agency, my freedom. And not because the person who killed my brother deserved it, but because it's my choice. And yeah, that's from that point on, this has become what I'm focused on because I don't want other people to go through what the two of us have gone through.
So you started your work a long time ago, but I'm just trying to see how we are turning grief. I mean, it's just sort of a lesson for many of us who see a lot of rage and anger and blaming, constant politics of blaming. How did you turn that around? I mean, it's just like an extraordinary thing. We all, as human, feel anger and rage. How do you succeed in doing it? Just teach us a little bit about how you do that.
So, like I said, I was prepared and I was ready by my parents. That's the way I'm continuing the legacy of my parents. I was born in a kibbutz just a mile away from Gaza. My both grandparents were Zionist pioneers immigrating to Palestine under the British mandate and establishing 2 kibbutzes in the Negev. And when my parents got married, they moved to live at my father's kibbutz. And my father was the manager of the farm. Being the manager of the farm in the kibbutz is like being the dean of the university. at least being the dean. And I remember like it was last dinner. Yeah, like we had the dinner just last night, and my father will always share how difficult it is to be a farmer. There, definitely in the Israeli desert, there are floods and droughts and insects and wave of cold and of heat. And he would always say how much the situation in the field is catastrophe. But at the same sentence, he would say, but next year, I'm going to sow wheat again. Because next year will be a better year. But it's up to me to make it better. I would learn from my mistakes. I would consult with other farmers. I will get the best seeds. I will fertilize the land. I will make it ready for the rainwater to come. I have the agency to change the future, even if not to predict it. So growing up in this atmosphere of that I can take control of the future, it's what giving me the power and the ability to do exactly what we are doing now.
So taking control of the future is not an easy thing. You need to find partners in that project and common ground. And it's not always easy to find parents like yours who have imparted that to their children. So the question that I have, how do you build those common grounds with other people? And then what are the challenges? Not only in your community, but outside of your community.
Who's that
To you now.
question? Okay.
I'm just moving back.
Difficult question to Aziz, easy question to me.
I know
Okay.
him.
Wow. So again, another hour needed, and
All right.
to answer in a couple of minutes. How do you build coalition? How do you find partners? I think there are so many things I can say, but when I reached out to Maoz on October 7th, that's an example of how you build partnership. I didn't know if he would respond. I actually expected that he wouldn't respond because I thought of my
And
story.
we met only 10 years before for 5 minutes. We weren't friends, we weren't partners. We knew each other through common colleagues and friends, but we never corresponded directly.
Right. And so, but he responded. And one of our first conversations, he said, I'm not only crying for my parents, I'm also crying for every kid that's being killed in Gaza, for the people who are going to die in this war already. And that's how you build partnerships. You find people who have that same mission, that have the same vision that you do, that don't see you as an enemy. So the two of us, he's Israeli, I'm Palestinian, but we really don't see each other as an Israeli and a Palestinian. We see each other as two human beings on the same path, that working for the same cause. And so we're not enemies. And I think there is, and it's not necessarily just people, politicians do it, a lot of media kind of does it, where they like to bring an Israeli and a Palestinian to fight with each other. On October 7th, I got 1 million invitations to media that I turned down 99% of them because what they wanted me to do, they're like, here's an Israeli general, we would like you to get on TV and argue with them. And I said, that's not what I do. I'm not here to argue with generals. That's not my expertise. I'm a peacemaker. I'm a peace builder. And sometimes we might argue, but that's not our main forte. Instead, in our case, I was realizing that if people want to divide us, don't divide us as Israeli versus Palestinians. Don't divide us as Jews versus Muslims. I would suggest if you must have those division lines, it should be those who believe in equality, in justice, in recognition, in dignity, in safety, in all the values that all of us should believe in, and those who don't yet. And our mission is to build that coalition, that partnership, that more and more can join us into that group. But I don't even look at those who don't yet as enemy, because I was one of those at some point. Those are people to engage with. Those are people I want to talk to. And hopefully we can expand our coalition that's based on values.
So, Maoz, you want to talk about those coalitions that are building?
Yeah, maybe before I have to first in this battle, I hope you were gonna ask me, Maoz, what is this battle?
What is it, this battle? What is
Okay,
this
thank
battle?
you, Micheline. in this battle, there is the formula, the recipe. How are we gonna make peace by 2030?
Okay.
But let's wait. Let's keep them, waiting
The
for it.
suspense?
Yeah,
Go
okay,
for
but
the suspense.
we'll get there. Okay, how are we gonna make peace? It's very easy. It's very simple. It's not easy. It's simple.
Okay.
It's simple. I want before, if it's okay, to share the three main lessons I learned since October 7th, and I don't want to describe it as lessons, but as seeds, because now it's the month of October, and every October for the last 60 years, my father, like I said, he wasn't just the manager of the farm, he was the best farmer in Israel. The most admirable farmer in Israel. I'm not saying it because I'm his son, I'm saying it because it's a fact. For 60 years, during the month of October, he would prepare the fields to sow wheat, which happens in the early weeks of November. And if we want to harvest peace by 2030, we must sow now. We must sow the seeds of hope, the seeds of the future, and the seeds of forgiveness. And hope is an action. It's not something you can find or lose. Jessica, right? Okay? It's not something you can find. No one else will gonna bring you hope. Hope is an action. I want to encourage us and invite us all in this beautiful room to make hope together, because you cannot make hope on your own, by yourself. And in order to make hope, we must together envision a better future and to act in order to make it into a reality. So we are now building a coalition. This is how we're doing it. It's not by talking, it's by action. Okay, so let's now together, let's act and envision a better future and act to make it into a reality. But we must be very honest with ourselves to check and to prove if our actions are effective. If they are effective, it's amazing. It's amazing. We're gonna reach and meet this future. And if they are not effective, it's not a reason to give up. It's just a reason to change our action till we're gonna find the one that is effective. So this is why we are building a coalition, and this is why and how, and you were there, Micheline, in July 1st, the biggest peace rally that was held in Israel in 2 decades. More than 50 civil society, organization, individual, Palestinian Israelis, that we grouped together to perform and do a peace event in the center of Jerusalem, 6,000 people. So Tel Aviv, sorry. It's Tel Aviv. Next one will be in Jerusalem, inshallah soon. So this is how you build a coalition, by action, by synchronizing, by sharing values, by building trust.
Okay, just wonderful. So I don't want to be the party pooper.
No, we love it. You're doing it great. It's
just asking you this question. So in this effort of building, and I remember July 1st being just of an amazing conference where 6,000 people really gather together to talk about peace, almost just like a surreal moment, because this is in the midst of war and you do not expect to see something of that sort. It's almost like a Back to the Futures of the 90s, where there was peace activism and NGOs were just sort of like were showing leaflets and peace. So that was an extraordinary moment. But to gain traction is always difficult, right? And you have a lot of spoilers in the process. So I want to, not you, this is a tough question, so to you.
No.
So to you.
Getting ready.
Okay, then it's to you. So how do you counter those spoilers in the process of trying to gain traction in your community and outside of your community?
Well, first, spoilers are normal. I mean, if there were no spoilers, we'd never have any conflict that lasts long. Actually, when you look at other conflicts, you look at Northern Ireland, for example, the biggest terror attack in Northern Ireland happened after the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, not before. So spoilers are always there. It's about how we respond to them. And do we respond to them and saying, well, then peace doesn't work, which is how a lot of people are responding after October 7th, for sure. I've heard people say, well, those who lived in the kibbutzes were pro-peace, and look what happened to them, therefore peace is impossible. That's a spoiler. But I think we responded exactly the opposite by saying, in the worst moment is exactly when you need the cure. When you need, I mean, war to me and killing and destruction is a sickness. And it needs medicine, it needs a cure. And so you can't let spoilers stop you. You can't let them defeat you. I would say one of our first conversations, Maoz and I, actually our first conversation, I asked him, how could you, right away after your parents are killed, do this? And he said, it feels to me like if I'm in the desert, you don't have many deserts here, but if we were to go to Wyoming, I'm getting in trouble. You have a desert in Colorado? Oh, okay. I haven't been there. I've been to Telluride, I've been to Aspen, I've been to Denver, I've been to all the green and mountains. But if you were to go to the desert in Colorado in the summer, and you get lost, and you have no water, no food, nothing, and you see a human being there, what would you ask for? What would you ask for? Not your credit card. You'll ask for water, right? You're thirsty. You're going to want water. So if you're in the middle of a war, of people dying, of so much horrible things happening, it is the normal thing to ask for peace. That's how you beat spoilers. And yes, there are people in our communities who will say, no, and this doesn't make sense, and you're being naive. And our response, we're not the ones who are naive. There have been, this is not the first round, it's the worst for sure. But this has happened before. It happened 3 years ago, it happened 5 years ago, it happened 10 years ago. And every time it happens, people tell you, well, it's gonna solve every problem, and it hasn't. So the naive ones are the ones who think by dropping bombs or by exploding or by shooting or by killing or by kidnapping, you're gonna actually achieve peace. We've tried that.
So, Maoz,
Yeah,
there's not a shortage of spoilers in Israel.
Yeah.
You want to talk about them?
Yeah. So I always answer spoilers with a story, because stories is what make us do what we are doing. And I want to share. Usually I share it at the end of our talk, but I want to share it now. I want to share the story of Andromeda and the monster Medusa from the Greek mythology. Andromeda was sacrificed by her parents to the monster of the sea. And we humanity, we've been sacrificing our loved one since the beginning of humanity, till nowadays. It's a decision, it's a choice we are taking on ourselves to sacrifice our loved one. And Andromeda was saved by Perseus, the son of Poseidon, and he saved her by beheading the monster Medusa. And you all know Greek mythology, everyone who's looking in the Medusa eye become into a stone. And when the monster came from the sea, he showed her the eyes of the monster Medusa, and the monster was killed. This is, and what I want to say and argue, that this is a false story. It's a lie. The story of Andromeda and the monster Medusa is a lie. Because the only way to kill a monster is by looking to her in the eye. And if we would look in the eyes of the monster Medusa and we start dialoguing with her, we would learn that Medusa wasn't born a monster. She was born a beautiful Greek girl that was raped by Poseidon in the temple of Athens. And her trauma wasn't treated, wasn't cured, wasn't healed. On the contrary, she was cursed. And then she became a monster. But if we would look to her in the eye, we're not just going to humanize the monster Medusa, and she would stop being and acting as a Medusa, as a monster. We're going to humanize ourselves. And it's always going back to us. What do we choose? Do we choose to be a monster, or do we choose to be human? And this, with those stories, I'm not arguing with no one, with no spoilers or no argument. I'm never arguing. We are not debating. We are sharing stories that are reflecting the best side, the human side of each one of us. It doesn't matter if we are Palestinian or Israelis, Christian, Jews, Muslim, or others.
Okay, which was very well. Let me push back.
Fine,
Okay,
go for it.
that's right. So we know we're on an American campus, right? And there's been a lot of politics on American campuses since October 7, as you both know, and people who fight on behalf of their sense of justice against each other. Amidst all that, there's been also the rise of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. What do you offer to students who have been sort of in part of that turmoil, both agent and in part of that turmoil?
You want me to start with it?
Whoever wants.
I will
It's up to you.
I will start. So I want to start and go to the next. We shared the seed of hope, how important it is, and now to share the importance of the seed of the future. Because at the moment, you here in the campus, your societies in the state, you are importing the conflict. You are importing the conflict, and many of of us, identifying ourselves by the side we choose to be pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, each one of us with what he chooses. And what I want to share with you here is that don't choose a side, choose the future. Because the future is where the Israelis and Palestinians meet. And even though nowadays, the gap, the wide between our stories, like Aziz said, it's the bloodiest and the number of casualties, the highest in 100 years of conflict. We are far away from ever, but we do meet in the future. And in order to get to the future, we must decide what our values are, our core values. And those values should guide us to the future. And this doesn't mean if we are in between the river to the sea or here in Denver, Colorado. And the values of the future that we all share are dignity and equality, acknowledgement and recognition of each other, reconciliation and healing. And the US been reconciled with your biggest enemy in the past, with Germany, with Italy, with Japan. Now you're forming together the G7 group. You made your enemies of the past into your partners of the present and the future. And the future is where we meet, where we are all safe and secure. And there will be no security and safety to one without the other. So always to be focused on the future, to sow the seeds of the future, and we must cultivate them. Because if we won't take a very, very good care of them, they will die. And if they die, we are literally paying with our life.
Okay, very well. You want to answer that?
Yeah, I look at it maybe slightly different. I agree with Maoz, but I want to say it's a good thing that students do care. And I've heard some politicians especially, which this issue got politicized a lot, which made it a lot harder to deal with in campus, because the moment politicians get involved, it brings polarization with it. But for me, it's important that people care, and it's important that students care, and it's important that they voice their opinions. And it's important that, college students are usually, in some way, sometimes a conscience of this country. But at the same time, we have to be careful about how our voices are being used and shared, and how we can build something sustainable. And that would be my message. So I'm gonna give you a couple small examples of stories that happened. And when I worked at George Mason, our university had chose a person to do the convocation that wasn't accepted by the Palestinian students. And it started a big, big conflict, because if you know George Mason University, it has a big Arab Muslim Palestinian community in it, students. And this was going to be a mess. So the president knew it's not going to go well if this person get on stage and the students going to protest. And so he, being a smart president, called his conflict resolution department and said, you know, if you have a conflict resolution department in the school, why not use it when you need it? So he called us and he said, help me out. What do we do? And we sat down with the students, we sat down with the president, and we worked out a way that the students' voices were respected and honored without causing necessarily problems in the convocation meeting. And it started a dialogue that didn't exist before. Why the students weren't happy? What can happen differently in the future? What were the issues? And we came up with a solution, which in this case was recognizing from the stage the grievances of the students. The president himself said, I understand, I know you're not happy with this choice, and I'll give you the opportunity to stand up and to leave and show that you're not happy with it. And so we worked out a solution, but it worked. And I think because today this is so politicized, it's much harder to do it in this way. And so maybe one of the things we have to do is work against the politicization of students voicing their opinions and pushing more for a dialogue between students, between administration and students. In my experience, and we've been to a few campuses, we've had really incredible conversations everywhere we've been, and successful conversations everywhere we've been. When people feel heard, they react differently. And so that has been, again, our experience. Doesn't mean it's true everywhere, but it's been our experience.
I'm sure it takes very good moderators to get this dialogue ongoing, and you've done a great job. I want to just push a little bit to this concept of peace that you're advocating. We know that the Oslo Agreement failed. 1993, then it failed in 2000. After that, the Intifada came, and that was pretty much the end of any peace conversation. 7 years of hope, the derailment of peace. What are the lessons learned as we are thinking about the next round in light of what happened with Oslo?
The lesson I learned is that the conflict cannot be manageable. That wall will never bring defense, because the wall that was shadowing my parents' house, only 200 meters from the wall, 200 meters from the border. It didn't bring them any defense. They thought they are living in heaven, and you haven't been there with the Majdi tours, but there was a beautiful mosaic on the wall in Netiv Asara, the community we moved to when I was 14 from the kibbutz I was born. There was a wall, the path to peace. But again, it was a lie. We were fooled by it because it was proven to be the path to hell. 20 members of the community were killed on October 7th. So those who believe that war will bring defense, that bombs will bring quiet, that war will bring security are naive. And they've been failing for so many times. So I learned that the only way, and in the last year also been reading and doing a lot of research about North Ireland, about Rwanda, South Africa, the US and Japan, US and Germany, about the founding nation of the EU, the 6th founding nation, Germany and France and Belgium and Holland, among them, and Italy and Luxembourg. Please don't forget the great Luxembourg. We need to make Luxembourg great again. Luxembourg is great. You don't need to make it great again. That realize that, again, in order to prevent the next war, we should not be prepared or should not prepare ourselves to the next war. We must prevent the next war. In order to prevent the next war, we must make the enemy of the past into the partner of the future. And we are both business entrepreneurs. In Israel, where I'm coming from, 9 out of 10 businesses are not surviving 2 years. But again, it's not a reason to give up. It's just a reason to learn from our mistakes and keep on trying. And in North Ireland, I don't remember, it was 10 or 15 peace negotiation and deals that failed. But eventually, you need only one to succeed. But if we want keep on trying and keep on trying, the atrocious and the escalation, we're just going to face it.
I think I silenced myself.
I need to find one.
I have three things that I think we learned from the failures of Oslo. One, there weren't many women involved, and there's a lot of research. There's a lot of research that shows that if women are involved in the actual negotiations of a peace agreement, it has a 30% more chance of success. It's true. It's not my opinion, right? This is a fact. So when you don't have women, you have a bunch of military people. Yeah, I actually think it would have been a miracle for it to succeed. So that's number one. Number two, who wasn't in the room? Peacemakers. Us. We weren't invited. So again, you bring a bunch of generals who don't really know how to negotiate, who only think about winning in every negotiations. There's no compromise. You're obviously gonna lose. So lack of peacemakers, lack of having women in. And the third is the focus was always on lines and how things can go and where exactly. And so it's very much on the issue, but never really talked about what the values of these negotiations were. What do we believe in? What's the base of these negotiations? If you don't have a base, it's a problem. Maoz earlier talked about these values: equality, dignity, recognition, reconciliation, security, safety for everyone. And if you're not starting from there, then whether you end up with 2 states, 3 states, 1 state, confederation, it really doesn't matter. It's gonna fail. You need to have a baseline of what you believe in and what's the values that you're building this peace agreement on. So I hope this is what we're working on in the future. Those are the 3 things we need to fix for the next round of working together.
Okay, you want to add to this? Or, okay, I'll just continue. So, an interesting idea, but let's be pragmatic, okay? I'm sure you're pragmatic, but let's be even more pragmatic. Yeah, no, you are. I just even more so. So there is continuing war in Gaza. Hostages were not released. Hamas is still working in the tunnels. There is war in the north of Israel with Lebanon, and potential attack with Iran, and some rockets going back and forth with the Yemeni. So how do you propose? This is sort of like an impossible puzzle. How do you propose to consider this next step? Do you have ideas? What would be the next step? Can you think about it? Can you tell us?
I'm trying if I want to share the formula, how we're going to make peace as the next step, because that's the steps. There are 5 steps in making peace by 2030. Or to go to your former question, because in all the former peace talks that were failed, Camp David 2000 and Oslo, there was never the component of reconciliation and forgiveness. And if there is no reconciliation and forgiveness, something is missing. Okay, it's not complete. And like we had no, Israel has never done any reconciliation, not with Egypt and with Jordan, only with Germany. So many people also but Hamas, and what Hamas has done, we cannot forgive about it. It was like, it was so notorious, so horror that we're never gonna be able to get over this trauma. But the Jewish people were able to go on cure yourself for a much greater trauma from the Holocaust. And now Germany is our biggest friend and supporter. I would doubt it if what they're doing now is really friendship, but maybe we'll get it later. But we were able to reconcile with the German people. And forgiveness is the most powerful feeling or emotion or tool that we can use. This is what Aziz and I have been doing this week, realizing more and more the power of forgiveness. And forgiveness is the most rare and unique and hard to find seed that we must sow. Because in order to build the future, we must forgive for the past and the present. And I learned it from our common friend and colleague, Hamza Awad, the Palestinian peace activist. And his family was displaced from the Negev, from where Kiryat Gat is today, and then they moved to refugee camp near Hebron, and all his life he lived under military Israeli occupation. And he said, I'm willing to forgive. And asked myself, if I want to be like Hamza, whom should I forgive to? And then the immediate answer was that I must forgive Hamas. Because Hamas, in my narrative, Hamas is extremist terrorist organization, fundamental organization that is killing and oppressing his own people and innocent people. If they are Jewish Israelis, even better. And in my narrative, they kill my parents. So I've decided to forgive Hamas. But I was seeking revenge. I wanted to punish those who promised my parents and my childhood friend and my communities so many times in the past, security and safety, security and safety, security and safety. And they totally failed. And I'm talking about the Israeli government. I was seeking revenge in the government. And seeking revenge destroyed me from the inside. I stopped functioning as a father. I stopped functioning as a husband, as a friend. I was just focusing in the revenge. But after listening to Hamza, I realized that in order to focus in the future, I must forgive them. So once again, I chose to forgive the Israeli government. And this is what we are doing now. For me, it's very easy. I'm in my zone. I'm not fighting myself. I always have the energy, even if I'm tired and jet lagged, I can go on and on and on to make peace and hope. And what was your question? So Hamas is an idea. It's an ideology. And so is the Israeli government. It's an idea, an ideology of Jewish supremacy between the river to the sea. It's not about Zionism. It's not about Judaism. It's about Jewish supremacy. And Germany and the US, Israeli best friend, will never support any other state that will practice ethnical supremacy. And this is what we are coming here, to your campus, to DC, speaking with policymaker, with a representative of the House. This is exactly what we are sharing with them. How can you support ethnical supremacy? I cannot understand it. So it's the same with Hamas. So the only way to win over extremist ideology is to create a different ideology that is of peace, that is based on hope, on the future, and forgiveness. So and I'm not an historian, and I never learned Middle East studies. But what I learned is that Hamas, the days that Hamas was as weak as ever was during the Oslo agreement, when there was a new vision for the future. This is when the extremists are getting weak. And this is exactly why the extremists in North Ireland, the biggest terror attack was after the Good Friday Agreement, after peace was already made. So we can fight extremism only with love, with empathy, and forgiveness.
Do you agree?
I don't have much to add, but I'll add maybe a couple of things still, because we both like to talk.
Where do I silence him? I can do it from here?
Nope, it's stuck. I think Maoz is 100% right on you cannot defeat an idea with military force. I worked in Afghanistan. We knew already, I was in Afghanistan 2010, 2011. Already we were talking about there is no defeating Taliban. And instead of thinking of how to replace the idea, the focus continued to be on military force, wasted the next 10 years, and still didn't defeat Taliban. And in one of the leaked conversations from the cabinet, the Israeli cabinet, this happened about 6 months ago, one of the ministers asked, so when are we going to get Sinwar? When are we going to catch the guy? He's the big catch. He's the main guy, right? And one of the military leaders said, we don't know. It could take like bin Laden 10 years or more. And they were like, wait, so we in war for 10 years? And they said, we might be. And that's terrifying to hear that the plan is this could be an endless going on war. That's just like the war in Afghanistan, just like the war in Iraq. Like, you know, for Americans, it took a long time to realize this wasn't worth it. In the beginning, Americans supported the war in Afghanistan, supported the war, at least some, I think majority in the Afghanistan one, at least in the beginning. And it took years to realize this is not working. And so what Maoz mentioned about an idea, and it needs to be fought with an idea, it's important. We do have allies in the region too. The Jordanian foreign minister just last week spoke, not him alone, also the Saudi foreign minister said, we want to do an agreement. Let's sit together and
they
make
spoke in the name of 57 countries, all Arab and Islamic countries.
And I think one of the mistakes you asked earlier about the mistakes of negotiations, it should bring not only the U.S. as a mediator, because the U.S. has not done a good job in mediation, not only in Israel-Palestine. Sorry, I know maybe I'm in an international relations and negotiations school. But even like we mentioned, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, our track record hasn't been good in the last 20 years. And we need to bring other forces in, other people in, and bringing the Arab and Muslim countries in is definitely important, because you do have countries who are willing to be the mediators. You have countries who are willing to bring more of the Arab and Muslim world, and they can help when it comes to Hamas, when it comes to other forces. They are the ones you talk to. I don't think Israel has a chance of defeating Hamas or Hezbollah. I think if you want to change the region, we have to work all the countries together, not just Israel alone trying to solve that. And when you do that, you'll be able to defeat the extremist powers also within Israel, because extremism feeds on each other. Hamas benefits from Ben Gvir and from Smotrich and from Netanyahu, and vice versa. They need each other to exist. Extremists cannot exist in the lack of a counter-extremist group.
But the problem is also that when there is a void, there is no one to talk to. So if there's a question, many have argued, right or wrong, that because of the war in Gaza, now there is no Hamas, no representative of the Palestinian in Gaza, that in the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority is very corrupted, that Abu Mazen has not much of the popularity and legitimacy of the Palestinian population. So there is a void of Palestinian governance. And so the question, if you want to talk with interlocutors, which interlocutor would that be within the Palestinian? Mind you that the Israeli government is radicalized with ultra-right wing coalition, that's understood, but there is also a process of rotation should there be new election. 2 years?
I'm going to take this one, sorry. I don't agree with that narrative. And I heard the same narrative when I worked in Syria. If Assad is gone, who's going to take over Syria? And I was working in Syria, and I was meeting all these amazing leaders in the communities who were unbelievable. And I'm like, I can give you 20 names of people who could lead Syria way better than the government there. So those exist, absolutely, happy to give you those. And the same in Palestine. We are the leaders. I've run for an office in Palestine. No. I'm happy to take over from Abu Mazen. The problem, you did
in Jerusalem, yes.
Right, I ran for an office, and Abu Mazen was the person who fought against it. So did Israel. So everyone is like, we need new young leaders, right? That's what everybody says. And then when new young leaders come, I'm now older, but back then I really was young. When those new young leaders come, everyone ignores them or tries to make them fail in reality. So it was the I talked to friends in the Senate. I talked to friends in the House, in the US. I've talked to friends in the European governments. And I said, all I need is your help to at least mediate that I don't get shot. That's all I want from you. I'll do everything else. And they wouldn't do that. So there are leaders. I think don't buy the idea that nobody can lead. We have amazing community that are young. I know people in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s in Palestine who can definitely lead. And the moment they given that opportunity, they will. So I'm not worried about the lack of leadership. We do need a change. You're absolutely right. I think the Palestinian Authority is very corrupt. The average age, by the way, of the Palestinian leadership today is mid-70s. That's the average age. Now, think about this. 70+% of Palestinians are under 30 years old, 35 years old. So basically, most Palestinians, I'm old for, I'm in the 30% now, in the older 30%. Most Palestinians today, not just today, in the last 15 years, are not represented by anyone in government, not in Gaza, not in Gaza, and not in the West Bank. So that is needed. But again, we need a coalition to make that change. And that includes international community, that includes peace-building organizations, that includes you here being with us.
And we will try to be for that particular purpose. Before I move to the next question, I want to remind the audience to start writing the question down, because soon enough we're going to move to the question. So if you have an edit, people are going to come.
Remember, hard ones for him, easy ones.
So those of you who are actually in the back, please note that, just notice the one who are actually raising their hands, and just collect their question. So, to Maoz.
Easy one. Easy one.
I can't do softball. This is not the way I'm known. Okay. There have been major waves of protests against the Netanyahu's government, yes, that start 9 months before October 7 and resumed after March, I think that's when it was resumed, and they demanded a ceasefire with Hamas that would bring the hostages home. Do you really believe in the deep of your heart, you probably might, but explain us, that the grassroots peace initiatives are making inroads, or does hope depend really somehow on a top-down approach?
Okay, so that's just to correct you. You're like commenting that the protesters and the protest demand the ceasefire is wrong. They didn't. The protesters...
Not initially.
Even now, the protesters are calling, the majority of them, 90% are calling for a hostages deal. They are not calling for a ceasefire to stop the war. And I think this is exactly where they are wrong. Because the only way, and I'm saying it from October 7th, I'm not saying it from October 2024. From October 2030, the only way to bring the hostages back is to stop the war and start dialoguing and negotiating with Hamas. Through military pressure, we are just killing many civilians and we are killing many hostages. So what is happening now, and the Israeli government don't, and I would say something very harsh and difficult. The death of the hostages is serving the Israeli government. I will repeat. The death of the hostages serve the Israeli government in their mission to dehumanize the Palestinian and to wage an ongoing war. So, in order to save the hostages, we must stop the war. And unfortunately, the protesters and the hostages' families are not saying it. They are still counting, I don't know why and how, they are still counting on President Biden, who very generously crossed his fingers for us. This is what he said. They are trusting our friends in Germany that really care for the hostages, but still supporting a government that acts based on ethnical supremacy. So the hostages are not in the discourse anymore. And now the Likud, the leading party of the Knesset, on Sunday, they are organizing a rally to resettle Gaza with Jewish settlements. It's many ministers and members of the parliament are signed and supporting this event. And this government is supported by the US administration.
Well, is it the US government supporting this particular Israeli government, or just its fight in that war? That might be slightly different, but without going into this...
I want to add that 90% of the hostages who were saved in a deal. That's a fact, right? And I mentioned in the beginning, my friend Kim, my colleague, her childhood friend was taken as a hostage. She was released in a deal. Mm-hmm. And then her sister-in-law, the hostage who was released, sister-in-law, was killed in the last, when the military was trying to get 6 hostages out, and they were killed by Hamas before they were freed. Those were people who were supposed to be on the next deal. The names of that woman was supposed to be in the next deal, and she was killed. And so if we're talking about lives and we're talking about saving lives, I think the war is not the path to it at all. With the US government, we met quite a few members of Congress, quite a few senators, Maoz and I, and what we heard even from members of Congress is a frustration. Frustration even of the current administration. It was really fascinating, the conversations that happen off record, and we filmed, so this is on record. But there were frustration of lack of leadership. There's a frustration of feeling they don't know what to do. They're being led rather than leading. And that's true in Europe, that's true with Germany, that's true with the US. We have the ability to do much more, to stop this war. We have the ability to release the hostages, to release Palestinian prisoners, to stop a lot of the violence going on in the West Bank, to stop the war happening in Lebanon, to stop the war happening potentially with Iran. We cannot be led to activities. I started in the beginning by saying, with my story, when I decided to forgive, I said this was my choice, and I couldn't control the actions of the person who killed my brother, but I could control my actions and how I respond. And today we live in a reality where people have gotten to this mindset, there's no other choice. We are led to this situation, and it keeps getting worse and worse, and it is terrifying. My family live there, Maoz's family. I'm horrified every time I get a phone call, because you never know if it's a good phone call or if it's a bad phone call, because I've received a lot of those bad phone calls. And so it's not a game for us. It is our lives and our families' lives. And that's why, to me, it's unbelievable that this is still going on. It's unbelievable. We could have stopped it. I have no doubt about that. And I know from people who behind the scenes are working on it, we were very, very close multiple times. And the lack of leadership, including from the US, has made it not possible.
Yeah, just also the flip side, to make the argument complete, it's also true that Hamas need the hostages as a leverage. And
but as a leverage for a prisoner deal.
For what?
For a prisoner deal.
For a prisoner deal, yes.
But we can done this prisoner deal at the eve of October 7th, 2023.
But there are counter-argument to your point, just giving the fact that even the first deal was done, and then there was a slowdown of release of hostages, and the slowdown of the release of hostages was also giving more time to Hamas to regroup. That was also countered by the Israeli as a result of that. So it was always seen as a strategic tool for that the war.
For both, for Hamas and the Israeli government.
For
and the
sure.
Israeli government.
Yes.
I don't think either of us, let's be clear, neither of us are here to defend Hamas.
I just
Or
want to
obviously,
or the Israeli government.
Yeah, or the Israeli government. Obviously, you know, there's enough reason for us to dislike both immensely. But I think you're right. But Israel conquered Gaza already. Took pretty much all of Gaza so far. And then withdrew from North Gaza. Hamas was back in the next day. Because here's the thing we forget. In times like this, when tens of thousands of people have been killed, there's so much suffering, Hamas is recruiting today much faster than it ever has before. So you can defeat Hamas, and next month it'll be back again. And you can defeat it again, and next year it'll be back again. And it reminds me, honestly, of 1982. Israel went into South Lebanon, had complete victory. The total victory they talk about definitely happened in 82. What was the total victory? The PLO have to leave Lebanon and go to Tunis. So they're far away, they can't attack Israel. Great, complete victory. What happened in that year? Maybe you heard about this organization called Hezbollah, was established in 1982. Why Hezbollah got power? Because they said, well, Israel is occupying South Lebanon, we have to fight against Israel. Started a whole new round of things. And I feel we keep going into these cycles. So you can have a military solution could work. I'm not saying military solutions don't work, but they work for very, very short term. If you want a long-term quiet, military solution never works. Unless you want to kill everybody, which I'm hoping that's not going to happen. But we can't depend on military solutions to solve this issue.
But this is certainly correct. Makes your work much harder because now we have a war between not only Israel and Hamas, but Israel and Hezbollah, and also Iran is on site as a potential attack by Israel. So the question...
And the Houthi in Yemen.
Yes, of course. The Houthis in Yemen are not as at the same level of deterrence, but they are nonetheless damaging quite a bit. So I'm making your work on Israeli-Palestinian questions, which you have done for a long time, and now you have sort of a broad regional escalations that really connect, a war with the northern borders because the Israeli government wants to redeploy their citizens in the north, and then the fear that Iran will attack Israel in that process. How does this work of peace evolve?
Okay. So it started with a dream. Okay, I shared the dream that I saw the path to peace. And now I want to share the formula. Okay?
Okay.
It's okay? We have time now? Yeah,
great.
okay. It's our time. So before I want to share the formula of how to make peace, I just want to say that we made peace so many times in the past. Israel and Jordan, Israel and Egypt, the US and Japan, Germany, Italy. So peace is achievable. That's a fact. But what's in this battle was never achieved. In this battle, there is an sesame oil that was harvested by a combined harvester. And humanity was ever able to achieve it. And I know it because my father, like I told you, he was the best farmer and agriculture person in Israel. And he was invited to Ethiopia back in 2008 to learn and give some advice about sesame crops and how they cultivate sesame in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, he learned back then in 2008, they're cultivating millions of hectares of sesame. And all those millions of hectares are being harvested by hand, like this. So my father came back to Israel and he consulted with his partner that happened to be my childhood friend, Asaf. And together they start dreaming about this sesame variety that was never achieved, that will be able to harvested by a machine. And then after having the dream, they've decided what going to be the values of this magical sesame variety. High production of sesame per hectare, resilience to climate change, of course, harvested by a machinery, and that they will be able to cultivate in Israel. We have a dream of peace. We have the values of peace: equality and dignity, shared acknowledgement and recognition, reconciliation and healing, security and safety. The third step is to build a coalition. You asked before about the coalition. So my father and his partner, they formed a coalition, very, very powerful coalition of university, research centers, farmers, students, and this is exactly what we are doing now. We are forming a coalition. Hopefully the next meeting for our coalition will be in January 2025. And we formed a coalition just in the last week with 5 other universities and with so many communities and media coverage. So we are forming a Palestinian-Israeli coalition with international support. Exactly like my father and his partner done. And the fourth step is to have a roadmap, a plan. You cannot achieve anything without a plan. And in their plan, how to cultivate this unthinkable, unachievable sesame variety, they had a deadline to be harvested by 2025. And this is exactly what Aziz and I and many, many from the peace movement we are doing now. We are writing a plan. We are working on the plan, and the fifth step is to execute. Because if we won't execute, it will be a folder in our drive or on a shelf. And so now we are already in the execution, and that's exactly what they've done. They start executed, and they were ahead of time in a year and a half. 2 days after the death of my father, for the first time, a sesame variety in Israel that produced 8 times more per hectare than the sesame they started with, that they brought from Ethiopia in 2008, they harvested it. And I would like to read from the label, if it's okay.
Please.
I need, Aziz, I need to print the Jacobi is my father. The Jacobi sesame variety was cultivated at the Hebrew University Faculty of Agriculture as a premium, high-quality oil variety suited for the Israeli farming. The variety is dedicated in the memory of our friend Jacobi Inon, an agronomist, agriculture advisor, worker and lover of the land, known for his vast knowledge, integrity, and modesty. And if we gonna follow those 5 steps, the dream, the values, coalition, roadmap, and execution, we're gonna achieve peace by 2030. Mark my word and start counting the time.
I'll only add that the roadmap is very important. And did we mention what the roadmap?
Yes.
There are three steps that we have already, and we're working on the rest still together. But the first one is already happening here. Amplifying the voices of peacemakers. Our voices are not the most heard voices in anywhere. And the only way our voices can spread is through your help. You heard our story today. There are many other stories like us. Go and tell others. Spread what you heard. So that's the first thing, is amplifying the voices of peacemakers. The second is legitimize those voices as the leaders of the future. We talked about the absence of leadership. It's not something to cry about. It's not something to be sad about. It means we have to take leadership ourselves. But to take leadership ourselves, we have to also become legitimate. And in meetings we've been holding and conversations and actions we do together, that brings legitimacy. The meeting with Pope Francis, that brings legitimacy. Not because we just met him, because in our meeting, he agreed to be our ambassador for peacemaking for Israel and Palestine. He didn't just go, okay, yeah, whatever, peace is good, bless you, and that's it. This is really an incredible lesson in leadership, because I've met many politicians, and I was so amazed by his humility as a leader, ability to listen, not just talk, and then saying, how can I help, and follow through. when he says how I can help. When we asked him to take our words to the G7 meeting, he did it. And when we asked him to put these words in the final communique of the G7 meetings, talking about the importance of peacemakers in negotiations, in peace building, he made them do it. That's an example of leadership, and that's an example of how we can be legitimate. And the third thing, which all of us can do, is changing policies of our own governments. That's true in Israel, that's true in Palestine. We have a lot of policies to change in both of these countries, in both of these communities, but that's true also in the US. We talk a lot about peacemaking, but we invest way more as governments in war than we invest in peace. We invest more in sending weapons than we invest in sending help to reconcile. And we can talk about numbers. Last year alone, we talking about tens of billions of dollars going to our region in weapons. You want to guess how much went to supposedly peace-building activities? 50 million. How do we expect, like if any of you have done business, where you put your money, where you put your effort, where you put your resources is where you're going to reap a result. And if we put all of our resources in the machines of war, we're going to get war. If we put our resources in promoting peace, we get peace. And that's, you know, we can learn. Northern Ireland is an example. When the international community shifted and said, we're going to put resources behind peacemaking, the EU did. The United States created the International Fund for Northern Ireland. All these countries came together and said, we're going to change our approach. It worked. Even though in '94, no one would have believed that a peace agreement would have happened in Northern Ireland. Everyone thought Palestinians, Israelis going to do it first. And things flipped because of international community. So all of us can work to make that change.
Thank you. This is excellent. I mean, I want to thank you for starting a conversation that we want to certainly continue at the Center for Middle East Studies. We're going to do more of that and talk about roadmap. And we understand, and students also, we were discussing that in class today, that those who don't think about alternative ultimately become complice of a bad status quo. And so alternatives are always the most welcoming thing. So I want to move now to the Q&A segment of our conversations. And I think Ahmed Abduraboum, the Associate Director of the Center of Middle East, is going to take that forward. Yes.
Am I audible? Yes. Okay. So I have 51 cards, so I'll do my best to maybe... and some cards like...
Fortunately, we have very short answers,
yeah.
as you saw.
So what I suggest is like I'll ask questions in waves, like maybe 3 questions per time, and then pick whatever questions you want to answer. And not a single question here, as far as I can tell, is directed to any one of you, which means like feel free to pick whatever question you want to.
You're the difficult one.
Okay.
But like, again, being a Middle Eastern myself, I'm going to abuse power, and I just want to make a very, very short, very, very short comment, not a question, which is, you mentioned, Aziz, I was really interested in what you mentioned about what we need to really have peace, and you put like 3 different conditions. I would add one more, which is political will. And it's very important. I was born in Cairo, Egypt, 1980. That was exactly 8 months after Egypt and Israel signed the peace agreement. Both Menachem Begin in Israel, who, by the way, was Likud, which is like more of right-wing, and Sadat of Egypt, signed the peace agreement, where, at least from the Egyptian side, so many Egyptians were against it. Many Arabs always, and up until now, some people would always claim that Sadat, who already died only 2 years after he signed the agreement, mainly because he signed the agreement, he was assassinated. But like, many Arabs and many Egyptians would still look at Sadat as a traitor. However, someone like me, I'm 44 right now, I wouldn't have made it that far to the States or to Corbel if Egypt didn't sign a peace agreement with Israel. Because if that didn't happen, you know, in Egypt, we have a mandatory service to the militaries. It's a conscription system. So I would have been drafted. Most likely, I would have been killed by an Israeli soldier, or I would have killed an Israeli of my age. So what I'm trying to say is, without political will, in addition to what you said, there's no way you can make peace. And unfortunately, I don't see the political will. Definitely not with Hamas, not with
I can
Netanyahu.
answer that, though.
Yeah.
I think politicians, usually Maoz says this, but we borrow each other words. You never know who said it first. Our politicians today follow the polls and follow the discourse and follow what they think will help them succeed. And that's why I say they're politicians, they're not leaders. So if we able to change the discourse and we able to change the vision and we able to give people a vision. The Bible says in the book of Proverbs, without vision, people perish. And that's what they're banking on. That's the no will. But if we change that discourse with everyone's help, they can't. There's a rule in social science that says 3.5%, right? The 3.5% rule that says, if you want to see a change in anywhere, if you have 3.5% of the population actively, daily, working for that change, it will happen. You don't need even the majority, you need 3.5%. And we see that. We see that with Hamas. We see that with the settlers. In Israel, settlers are way overrepresented in government, get way more budgets than anybody else in the country, have way more power in every aspect of the society than their numbers. They 8% of the society, they control the government. And why they do it? Because they figured out how to use the 3.5%. We need to reorganize, and that's exactly what we're doing, so we can have that 3.5% and force a political will. Don't wait for political will because it will never happen on its own.
Okay, so I'll go now with 3 questions, and then you choose whatever you want to react to. The first question is, how has your definition of justice changed over time or in your lifetime? Second question is, if Israel won't accept or won't admit that what they are doing in Gaza is a genocide, so how do you go force with peace if they don't accept reality? Third question is, does peace look like a 2-state solution, a 1-state solution, an integrated society, or something else? So,
Okay.
yeah, first answer the first.
I will take the first and the third, and Aziz will take the second. I was prepared for those questions too. And I will also at the end, I would like to share how my mom prepared me. And it's in this postcard. So I brought 1 postcard for each one of you. So if you have to go early, I will bring you postcards, and there is 1 for each. Okay, so it's like something to remember from tonight. What was the question? The first one?
So how your definition of
yes,
justice?
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that might again sound
It's
controversial.
one of the only things we disagree on, probably.
So far, I didn't find the answer or the seed for justice. I think, and I'm afraid to say, that the world is not just, and there is no justice. And I will again resonance the words of President Biden, who said after Israel killed Hassan Nasrallah, that justice was made for his victim. You cannot make or bring justice for those who are already dead. You can't. You cannot bring justice to my parents or to our family. How can you make justice? Or to the innocent people who were killed in Gaza, in Lebanon, in the West Bank. So I believe I haven't found the answer for justice. I don't think we should try to, again, maybe I need another dream or another vision or another lesson, but so far, and we met really amazing people from Pope Francis and scholars and leaders of peace and reconciliation, but I haven't found the answer how to make justice happen. So I'm not looking for it. I'm looking or acting, I'm making hope, I'm building the future, I'm using the power of forgiveness, and maybe down the road, on our journey, on the path to peace, we're also going to find justice. But I haven't found it yet. The third one is...
Third one, 1-state, 2-state, a confederation,
okay, that's an easy one, so I'll take it. Okay. I don't care. But I'll say for both of us, we don't care. Because there can be 2 states that will wage war on each other, Ukraine and Russia. There could be one state that there will be a genocide like Rwanda between the Hutu and the Tutsi. So the political solution is not the answer for peace or to the end of the violence. And the answer is the values that we share, and I'll share again. It's about equality and dignity and shared acknowledgement and recognition, reconciliation, security and safety. We care more about the values. That's what's important. And then the political solution will be in the room as the peacemakers, or we might be the political leaders by that time. And we'll see together Palestinian Israelis with international support from the Arab and the Muslim world, from Europe, hopefully the US too. And together we'll find what's the best political solution. But if we're not gonna agree on the values of this solution, it means that we're not preventing the next war. We need to be prepared for it.
So after all, you have a sense of justice because it's built on equality, security, perhaps political representation, so forth.
Maybe, but again, for me, I don't know how to make justice to my parents, to Aziz's brother. I don't think we can make justice to them, bring justice.
I interpret justice in the sense of restorative justice. So I look at places like South Africa, I look at places like Northern Ireland, I look at places like, different conflicts which they had to deal with the concept of justice. I agree that there is no perfect justice when someone is killed, and in most conflict zones, they had to wrestle with the concept. And that's where restorative justice comes from. The question about what if they don't agree, I think it was, what if they don't agree with genocide in Israel?
Yeah, no. So the question is about what to tell people who in Israel who don't confess or who don't admit that they are doing a genocide in Gaza.
So I want to say, in general, that shouldn't, like most Israelis, by the way, I watch Israeli news. Most Israelis know nothing about what's happening in Gaza. It is, if you watch Israeli news, you would be amazed how little Gaza is in the news. The images you might see on social media, the stuff you might see on television are not really in most of Israelis' awareness. And normally what you will see is the stories of what's happening in Israel. So if there was rockets from Lebanon to Israel, that's going to be the main story. If a soldier was killed that day, that's going to be the main story. So, and I have to say, this is not unique to Israel. In most conflicts and war, people only focus. Media kind of becomes a player in perpetrating the war because we only focus on our own pain, our own story, our own narrative, and we will not show anything else that will weaken the morale kind of the society. That's how it's seen. So I think most Israelis I meet, we talk with the Israeli society, and maybe you can mention a bit about that. We are the first people that talk to them about what's happening in Gaza. And they, even when they watch stuff on social media, they don't believe it's true. So you have to come from that point of view. I will take that question to a different question, just since it might be in your questions. I think in this time, and maybe it answers your question about campuses, in this time we also have a lot of terminologies that we use that mean different things for different people. And so, for example, I've been doing a lot of trainings on Islamophobia and things like that, and anti-Palestinian bias in campuses and in corporations. And one of the things I found, when people mention any word right now, intifada, kufiyya, Zionism, you can pick any word that has to deal with Israel and Palestine, and I can bet you everyone has an extremely different definition of what each one of these things mean. For me, kufiyya, it's what my grandfather wore. It's what my father wore. It's what I grew up, it's in the house all my life. And then I talk to somebody here in the US and says, oh, it's terrifying to me. And I'm like, whoa, why? And we have this conversation that to me was a surprise. And he's like, oh no, but I thought this is a symbol of fighting and of wanting to kill Jews and all of that. But we have to define what we're talking about before we even go into conversations a lot of times. The same with Zionism. What do you mean by Zionism? There's a Ben Gvir Zionism, there's a Netanyahu Zionism, there's liberal Zionism, there's anti-Zionism. I want to know what exactly people talk about. So maybe one of the things we all can do, ask a lot of questions before you answer when people mention all these terminologies, because we really live almost in two different universes.
Yeah. And just to add, the Arab media would do exactly the same when it comes to the Israeli side. So when, for example, Israel is blocking aid to arrive to Gaza, it will be big headlines. When the aid is when the blockage is lifted and trucks are able to make it to Gaza, they wouldn't ever cover it, at least not as a headline. So I guess it's a similar dynamics with media. So 3 more questions, and I'll try to go as fast as I can. What do we say to those people who, because of the conflict, will not live to see peace in 2050, even if it becomes a reality?
2050?
Yeah.
That's way too late.
I guess you mentioned 2030, but this is, yeah, maybe
Hopefully
it's...
everyone here will be around in 2030. We're all young. That's the answer. We good?
And a second question is like, how can we go forward with peace when both Hamas and Hezbollah are aided by Iran, and 3 of them, Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, don't believe in or don't have forgiveness? Third question, forgiveness. Third question, which is the last in this round, what should the Palestinian side do to empower and increase role of women in the social and political life in Palestine?
Good. I can take the third.
Okay. Right.
And again, always you give yourself, like, you're free
Yeah.
to skip some questions. You don't really have to.
What was the first one? It
yeah.
was easy.
Yeah, the first one is like, what about, like, if we have some folks here who will not live till 2050 to see peace? And
If there will be no peace soon, there will be no one between the river to the sea. And I'm using the words of Professor Yuval Noah Harari, who was also present in the July 1st event, who say that 5,000 years ago, there were no Israelis and no Palestinians between the river to the sea. And if we won't make peace very soon, there will once again, there will be no Israelis and Palestinians between the river to the sea. There is an urgency. There is an urgency because if we won't choose the path to peace and reconciliation, and we'll just continue on the path, and I will read, I put the words of peace from Aziz, but I will share also the words that Pope Francis said. Let us not sow death, destruction, or fear. Let us sow hope. So if we'll continue to sow death, destruction, and fear, like we've been doing in the last 100 years, we're going to see the end of both people. And again, I'm crying, and I'm crying. I cried for all the Palestinian Israelis that will die in the war. And I'm afraid that if we won't act now to stop the war, to choose the path to peace and reconciliation, we're going to face numbers that we cannot imagine. Like we could not imagine October the 7th, the day before. We cannot imagine the number of casualties between the river to the sea that we're going to face really soon, not by 2050, really soon. So it's time to act now. There is an urgency, and this is why we're here. This is why we're working so hard. We are not here to win the debate. We are here to win life. To win life.
I think it is very, very important to bring more women into Palestinian leadership. Today, Palestinian leadership is pretty much all men. I was trying to think of somebody who's currently in the leadership in the Palestinian government, in the West Bank even. We're not talking about Gaza and Hamas. And I can't think of anyone. I mean, Hanan Ashrawi, but she's not there. She was ousted by the president already 10 years ago. So that is extremely needed, but that can only happen when this government changes. Look, our current president approval rating is about 8%. I mean, I never heard of anyone, not even dictators, getting such low approval ratings. So this government has to go. And with it, we need not just women, we need young women. I mean, in this list here, we have one, Amira Muhammad, who is a friend of ours, woman in her 20s, who is brilliant and has been leading in the last year more than many of the politicians we know. I haven't even read this, so let's read it together. Palestinians and Israelis are partners, whether we like it or not. And our partnership is the only way forward. So people like that are the future for me, and the present, not just the future. So that's on the woman. I think
but I would, if I can just comment, also in the Israeli hostages negotiation team, there are no women. And this current government is with less women presentation, I think, in the last 30 years. So there is a similarity, a mirror between the Palestinian leadership, not leadership, whatever we call them, because there are no leader, to the Israeli one.
I think we answered the Hamas Hezbollah at length
yeah.
earlier, so I don't know if we want to go back to that.
Up to you. Okay, so two questions that are similar, however, they are in two very different directions, but like they are very similar in the content and the meaning. One is you talk about forgiveness. How can the Palestinians forgive for the Nakba, which is 1948, and their dislocation? And then a very similar, with different tone, how can we speak of peace while some of us, I guess I'm not sure us here or us in general, are anti-Zionism? So
Some of us are or aren't?
while some of us, I guess whoever wrote this means among us here, are anti-Zionism. So how can we speak of peace?
Anti-Zion.
Yeah.
So, Aziz, you want to take or
I only want to say this is amazing because these are
Yeah,
two
exactly.
questions.
And that's why I decided to.
The two of us, when we meet Israelis and Palestinians, we often get the exact same questions, just flip who's Israeli, who's Palestinian. So this is a good example. Go ahead.
Repeat the first question again. I'll take the first one. And,
Okay, sure.
How to
Yeah.
forgive the
So
Nakba.
you talk about
Okay,
forgiveness.
I learned about forgiveness from a Palestinian peace activist. It wasn't something I learned in the Jewish-Israeli education system or anywhere else. I learned it from a Palestinian peace activist that his family was displaced, lived all his life under military occupation. His father, we just Zoomed with him 2 days ago. His father was a Palestinian guerrilla fighter that at the end, he killed many Israelis and at the end was killed.
It's a grandfather.
His grandfather. And I think forgiveness is very hard. It's very, very hard and difficult to forgive. But you are doing it for yourself. Like Aziz shared before, to free yourself from the destiny and the prison those who harmed you forced on you. Yes, it's very hard, but it's much, much harder to choose war and revenge. Yeah, and the price you are paying in war and revenge are the ultimate price. You are paying with your life. So we are forgiving now in order that the next generation and that within our life will experience normal life. What's happening now, the multi-generational trauma, fear and war, it's not normal. It's changing the mindset. It's changing our humanity. We are dehumanizing the other. We are dehumanizing ourselves. And the cure for this dehumanization is forgiveness. So again, it's a decision. It's a choice each one of us should take. And we are modeling this. Okay? Now there are many heroes of war, heroes of vengeance. And we are here, this is the role we took on ourselves. we took the role to be heroes of forgiveness. And we are not just asking others to do it. We are modeling this forgiveness. So maybe not everyone will be able to forgive as much as we did, but just to know that it's possible, also it's starting the way into the for the solution.
I'll only add, forgiveness doesn't mean you're not angry about what happened. It doesn't mean you're not sad. It doesn't mean you're not gonna cry. These are emotions that will stay with you. I think forgiveness means you're not gonna let those emotions lead you to cause more pain and more hate and more. It's about the process. So I often say, you know, this week we talked to a friend of mine from Gaza. Maoz and I are writing a book, and we're doing a research on the book, and we talked to a friend of mine from Gaza. And the guy went through his lost 50 people in his family, more actually. His father was injured this week in one of the bombings in Gaza. He took him months to get his family, his wife and kids out of Gaza, and took him many more months to get them. Eventually, he's now in the US to get them to the US. And at the end of all of it, he goes, but Maoz, I'm really concerned about your family. Are they doing okay? Now, he's definitely angry, but anger can be like a nuclear power. You either can use it for light or you can use it for destruction. And Abdurrahim, this a friend of ours, used it for light. Now, somebody else, the question talks about how do you make peace with somebody who's like this or that? Well, if they agreed with you, you're not gonna need to make peace with them. You make peace with people who disagree with you, who have different narratives, who don't see eye to eye with you. That's the people we need to make peace with. So it doesn't matter what their political views, where they come from, how. That's the challenge. And you do make peace by listening. I think this is something so simple that we ignore. If you don't listen to people, there's no chance. Understand what do they mean, but whatever, again, terminology they say. And listen to the pain behind the words. Empathize with that pain. If you can't, then it's all a moot point. I remember talking to an amazing guy named Daryl Davis. And Daryl is a black man who's a musician, really an amazing musician, who helped over 200 Ku Klux Klan members leave. And when I asked him how, he said, I would sit with these guys and for hours, they go on a rant of racist stuff, on and on and on. And he gave me some examples. I don't even feel often comfortable sharing them because they are so racist that I don't want to say them. And at the end, he goes, then they finish, they have nothing else to say, and I don't interrupt them even once. And I go, okay, can I talk now? And he said, then they listen, because I listen to them, they're willing to listen to me. So that's a key. And he helped 200 Ku Klux Klan, including Grand Wizards, leaving the organization by doing that. He didn't go to people who agreed with him and said, let's have peace. That we already have peace.
I want to take the anti-Zionism question.
Yeah.
And first, like Aziz said before, what is Zionism? Okay, what is Zionism nowadays? I can tell you what my grandparents' Zionism was, is to establish a safe homeland to the Jewish people. This is why and how they immigrate from Eastern Europe in the early 30s of the last century. And what is Zionism today, I cannot know, and for each one is something different. But what I know, and I shared it with you, there are 7 million Jewish Israelis live between the river to the sea, and 7 million Palestinians. No one is going nowhere. No one is going nowhere. So if it will be one state, if it will be two states, if it would be confederation, like, we don't know. Personally, we don't care. But we must live together. And like Amira said, we must be partners because there is no other alternative. If we won't be partners, no one is going to be there. If the situation will continue to go the path, unfortunately, it's been going. So we must acknowledge that there are two people between the river to the sea. And this is the first acknowledgement that we must achieve in order to recognize in order to achieve peace in the near future.
Okay, so we have 19 minutes, and I really want to read as many as I can. So if you would kindly just cut your answers short so we can... No, I really appreciate what you're saying, but I want, because like usually what happens is people would be angry at me after an event like that because I didn't read their question, and then they would think that I'm screening questions, and I'm not, as long as it's written in respectful language. So okay, here we go. How do you propose dealing with illegal Israeli settlements? This is one question. Second, I find it difficult to find common understanding on this conflict going on in Gaza while people are watching different media. So how can we create a common narrative that leads to peace? And how would you change the way the United States has been involved in this conflict? 3 questions, choose whatever you want. I would kindly ask you to limit your answer to 1 or maximum 2 minutes.
Okay, so just the first word of the first one?
Illegal settlements, yeah.
Again, so I think again it's starting with envisioning the future and agreeing on those values, but for actioning now, it's sanctions, okay? To sanctions illegal settlements, to sanction members of the cabinet, of the parliament, of the government that are supporting those illegal settlements, and it's by action, not by thoughts, not by prayers, not by crossing fingers. It's moving into actions. But I'll take you, like Aziz and I are not speaking about it much, but we can create a real estate fund and start buying properties in the settlements, okay? And start renting houses in the settlements to Palestinians, okay? So this is how we can be active. We cannot just say, no, it's unsolvable, we cannot ever stop it. So let's use its existing infrastructure, highly invested real estate. So let's take control of it.
Today, actually, the UK announced that they will be sanctioning one of the organizations that's building illegal settlements, Amana. So that's an example. And I think there is a realization, it came a bit too late maybe, but there's a realization in the West that settlements are going out of control, and it's gonna make any peace agreement a million times harder. So that's a conversation already happening. Common ground, I think we gave you an idea how common ground works. I think if you focus on what to do rather than just on what happened. Look, we will never agree on everything in the past. My narrative and Maoz's narrative are not the same. My dad had to leave his school when he was 8 years old, never went back to school because of 1948 war, and he had to go and work, and then in 1967 with the war, he lost his business because of the war, lost everything he owned, basically. So our narratives will never be the same in the past, but what we can be the same is thinking of the future together. So we don't argue too much about history and try to focus on what can we do together to make things change. And then the last one was, I think, how to change the way the United States...
United States has been involved.
I would say a few things you can do, and I do that usually with even the Islamophobia training, is if you see something in media that you're like, this is problematic, don't be silent, start writing to them. They care about your opinion because you pay for it. So that's one, and media does drive a lot of this conversation. Try to push for all voices to be heard, voices of peacemakers to be heard. Write to your congressperson about the meeting today and tell them, we think you should hold this hearing in Congress. You know, peace activists are not called to a hearing in Congress to have a conversation with the Foreign Affairs Committee or with the Appropriation Committee or any of those. Write to your senators and tell them, I want you to meet with Aziz, with Maoz, with the other peace activists. There's a good list here. and have those people come to Congress and listen to them. If enough people do that, those things would happen. And it's not so hard. It takes 10 minutes of your time to do that. So it starts with simple stuff. I think too often we think of the hardest thing, like how can I make peace happen tomorrow? And if I can't achieve it by tomorrow myself alone, then there's nothing I can do and that's it. Instead, think of the small step you can do every day and be consistent in continuing to do it.
Okay, perfect. 3 more questions. How to counter anti-Israeli or anti-Jew education at elementary level in Palestinian schools? Second question is any peaceful resolution possible without a critical understanding and rethinking of colonialism? And the third one is, do either of you have a story of hope that has stuck with you? And this is from Madeline. She wrote her name here. So 3 questions. As usual, you have 2 minutes.
I like the last
Pick whatever you want. Okay.
No, it's funny. I cannot. I'm not prepared to remember 3 questions.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm not,
Okay.
it's
I'm sorry.
beyond- I can make peace by 2030,
Okay,
but
let's-
remember 3 questions. It's not.
Okay, let's go for this one. How to counter anti-Israeli or
Okay.
anti-Jew education at elementary level schools in Palestine?
And when we meet Palestinians audience or pro-Palestinian audience, they ask us exactly the same question about the Israeli education system. Okay, so it's by sharing narratives and again, it's going back to envision a better future. Okay, we must change the discourse that yes, peace is possible, and to follow the 5 steps how to make a dream into a reality. And in the roadmap, of course we need to invest in reconciliation education, in shared future education, and this is exactly what the US can do. And we need it for both people. And it's not just in the education system. The adults are also think of the other as monster, as the pure evil. So it's within both societies, from elderly to babies. So we keep dehumanizing each other for a century now, and this is why we see what's happening now is actually happening, and what we learned from Rwanda, we learned from South Africa, we learned from Ireland that it's achievable. It's achievable, but we must decide that we want to choose this path.
Okay.
I'm going to share a quick story.
Sure,
Sami
please.
Adwan, a couple of stories. Professor Sami Adwan and Ayal Naveh, Dr. Ayal Naveh also did an dual narrative education for elementary school. And unfortunately, both the Palestinian and the Israeli education system refuse to let it being taught in school. So when we get asked from both Israelis and Palestinians about it, it's very accurate. These are the books that should be taught. The story of hope, I will tell you a story from, tell you 2 literature pieces very quick. One is from Samih al-Qasim, one of my favorite Palestinian poets. And in it he wrote, "The day I'm killed, my killer will rifle through my papers, and he will find 3 traveling tickets. 1 to peace, 1 to fields and the rain, and 1 to the conscience of a humankind. So I beg you, my killer, do not waste such a thing. Do not waste these tickets. Take them and go traveling." And I think those are the stories of hope we need to remember. The second piece of literature is from Amos Oz. So I'm being fair, 1 Palestinian, 1 Israeli. And he said, if you're walking by a building and you see it on fire, you have 3 options of what you can do. The first, you run away. You say, if I go to help, I'm going to get caught in the fire. Look, the stuff we're talking about, somebody might hear and say, oh my goodness, these people, you might get in trouble. Run away. However, fire spreads. If we don't deal with fire in one place, like Maoz said in the beginning, it eventually moves all the way across, even thousands of miles away. The second option, you create a committee to investigate who should you blame for the fire. Congress is very good at that. But by the time you decide who to blame for the fire, everyone will be dead. And the third option, you get a bucket, you fill it with water, and you throw it in the fire. But he said, what if you don't have a bucket? You get a cup, you fill it with water, and you throw it in the fire. But what if you don't have a cup? You get a spoon, you fill it with water, and you throw it in the fire. What if you don't have a spoon? Then you cry over that fire. We can put that fire even with our tears. Now, would one person with a spoon be able to put out the fire? The answer is no. But there are a couple hundred people here. Some of you have buckets, some of you have cups, some of you have spoons. Some of you can cry with us. And if each of us thinks of what we can do, we can put out that fire. The problem is never that we don't have the ability to do it. The problem is we often pick one of the first two options and not carry our bucket or our spoon and do what we can do.
Okay.
So,
So the last one is any.
Thank you. I would, Ahmed, if it's okay, I would like to share, and I see some that are late for dinner with the family or some other engagement. So I'm getting hope for my mom. And my mom was a mandala painter. She painted thousands of mandala. Everyone would come to her studio, she would give him a mandala. She would give my sisters, my brother. She just gave mandalas to everyone, and I received only one. And in the mandala she gave me 8 years ago, she painted all our dreams can be fulfilled if we'll have the courage to chase them. So my mom not just gave me hope, she gave me the ability to dream and the courage to chase my dreams. And here, so I have a postcard for everyone. If someone can help me, maybe we can put it in the table. Thank you. And at the back, there are many words of peace from Amira, from Pope Francis, from Aziz. Maybe you heard about Aziz. But another story of hope I want to share from just after losing our parents. One of the survivors, the neighbor, she came to the Shiva. Every day she was coming to the Shiva. Shiva is the Jewish way of mourning. For 7 days, we mourn our loved one. And she came for the first day, and the second, and the third, and then the fourth day, she's WhatsApping me, Maoz, please, I'm apologizing, I'm not coming today. I had to find a shelter to my soul and body, so I'm in Berlin now. And if a survivor from the Hamas attack can find a shelter in Berlin that only 8 years ago, it was only 8 years ago, performed the most atrocious and genocide in the recent history for sure, where 40% of the Jewish people were massacred. And if she can find shelter there, if we are able to reconcile and make peace between the Jewish people and the German people, we can make peace and reconcile between the Israeli and Palestinians. So this story and what she shared with me only 4 days after, it made me know, it made me know, not believe, it made me know that peace is possible.
Okay. If Hamas releases the hostages, do you think Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu will be forced to stop fighting? I'll go one by one since you...
Yeah, I think it's not going to happen. So I don't like to answer hypothetical questions. It's not going to happen. And if
Which one is not going to happen?
Hamas is not going to release the hostages, and so it's not going to happen. So peace is going to happen, but that's not going to happen.
Okay. Online question from Jessica. How has the role of social media and international coverage and the general public's reactions impacted the conflict and initiatives for peace, if at all?
Good and bad. The bad is there's a lot of disinformation, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of people who feel I need to share whatever advances a certain point of view and not really what's true necessarily. And then, but it's good also because that's where people like us can be. So you can follow us on social media. We are very easy. Maoz, Inon, Aziz, Abu Sar, just our names.
And also on the QR code here. And sorry for jumping in, but there are here our friends from Standing Together, right?
Right.
Standing Together. So you learned about Standing Together. It's a Jewish-Arab grassroots peace movement in Israel, and you learned about it in social media. So social media is very, very powerful, and we have our curator in our TED Talk, and our TED Talk reached millions of people, thanks to social media. So we must use social media for the better cause and not just for division or polarization.
Don't believe everything on social media. That's very important. I've fallen for it. I'm sure you have. But also when actual media, also don't believe everything. And I'll give you one small example. This week, a journalist from Sky News wrote on her social media that, or was interviewed, and she said one thing that surprised her in Israel is no one she met that was against the war. Now, that's BS. I know a lot of people who are against the war. The 6,000 people who came to our July 1st event were against the war. That is not true. I know hostage families, actually, who are against the war. So for her to say that, and I was thinking, my Palestinian friend's going to read this and come to me and say, so why are you talking to Israelis? None of them are against the war. That's what a very well-known, award-winning journalist said. So even journalists can become too biased to a point that they are perpetrating this conflict and making it much worse. So be careful with especially opinions of people who are not as aware of what's really happening.
Okay, since I'm really caught in time here, we have only 2 minutes. I'll just ask one last question, and I apologize for people whom I couldn't really read the questions. It seems that one of the stumbling blocks in the path to peace is the refusal of many Arab states to acknowledge Israel's right to exist. Is that an overstatement? And if not true, how do you
Is that our
combat
last
that
opportunity to speak?
Yes.
Okay.
At least in
Aziz shared before, the foreign minister of Jordan, and on his side was the Saudian foreign of minister in the UN. UN Assembly 2-3 weeks ago in New York City, he stated very, very clearly, I'm standing here representing the 57 Arab and Muslim countries. We are willing to secure the safety of the people of Israel and the state of Israel if we're going to start now a peace negotiation talks. So he was saying it, and no one from the Israeli government, no one from the Israeli coalition, no one from the Israeli opposition answer this very, very clear call, request, offering for a peace negotiation.
I had to end it on a
No, Aziz, end it with this. We have for Michelin and for Ahmed.
We got a gift for you, but I think let's end it with something still positive, is that if, again, you take anything from us, is there is an alternative path. And if you look at us, we are here to model to you that the future can be different. And if there's anything that scares people who want war, it's the scene of us together. Because we show what everyone tells you is impossible, that it is possible, that peace is possible, living together is possible, not just working together, but being brothers, being friends is also possible. So I hope that as you're leaving from here, those are the thoughts you leave with.
So I'll have also ending remarks. So I lost my parents on October 7th, but I won Aziz. I won Aziz as a brother, as a friend, as a partner. And I won so many Israelis, Palestinians, international supporters, partners in our movement, partners in our tribe, a tribe that choose to bring the best of humanity and to prove again that peace will prevail. Because peace is possible. And we brought you a small gift. Micheline and Ahmed, this is for you.
We're selling this for $1 million.
Tell commission to us, please, like we agreed. Thank you, thank you.